To weigh in from New York City, America's accountant, Dan Geltrude. Dan, as always, it's great to have you on the program. Here are several companies, these massive companies, a lot of them, that are having to lay off employees, that are having to cut jobs out of their businesses and are having to drastically slow down their hiring. This is obviously as a result of this crumbling economy where we're in a recession, if not about to be in a recession. We'll see the Q2 reports, but this is a pretty big news.
It is, and I think it's a result actually of two things happening simultaneously. There's no question about the fact that the economy is slowing down from where we had been. So you have businesses that are taking on a lot of costs related to salaries and wages. So now, with the prospect of things slowing, they're going to look to try to cut those costs as quickly as they possibly can. That's point one. Point two is let's not forget that companies, through the pandemic, were looking for ways to not have to rely on labor. Whether that means that they were going to use technology or some other substitute, some type of self-service perhaps, whatever the case, to try to make sure that they weren't going to be so reliant on labor in case we have another situation where the government tells us nobody can go to work.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is happening here.
Yeah, and you know, we see governors like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. We have this from Breitbart News. It says Florida's surplus budget allows DeSantis to help families with $450 per child to fight inflation. I think this is a great idea. DeSantis has been pretty fiscally responsible, so he has a surplus budget to be able to do something like this. You have governors like Gavin Newsom in California who, they spend money like it grows on trees, and then they're issuing these gas cards to people and stimulus checks, and that's just making inflation worse. DeSantis can actually afford to help families out with credits like this. What are your thoughts on this $450 per child to fight inflation? Do you think it's a good thing?
Well, I think it's a good thing when your state has done the right things fiscally. If we take an example of Florida versus a state like California, Florida has no income tax. And the highest levels of income tax in California are over 13%. So what does that tell us? That tells us that California has a spending problem, like most governments. It's not that they don't get enough taxes, it's that they spend too much. So you look at Florida, where they don't have an income tax, they generate revenue from other means, and then they actually have money that can be returned to the people. Well, I think that's a wonderful idea, and that's what government should be doing, spending less and sending the money back to the people who need it. Put it in their pockets.
That's right, and I've just got to make a quick side note, Dan. I live in California. I can attest to the brutal income tax here. It's very tough living in California under Gavin Newsom's leadership. People like Governor DeSantis in Florida definitely doing it right. I would be in favor of eliminating the income tax from a federal level. I think that'd be a great thing. More money in my pocket, your pocket, and the American people's pocket, because the reality is the government's just going to waste most of our tax money like they do historically. Dan Geltrude, America's accountant. Great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Addison.
Well,